Hyunwoo Kim stood at the viewing port of the transport ship and watched the massive space station grow larger as they approached. The Galactic Council station was bigger than any human structure he had ever seen. It looked like a giant metal flower with thousands of petals made of steel and glass. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved around it like busy insects. Some were long and thin like needles, while others were round like balls. A few looked so strange that Hyunwoo could not even guess which end was the front. Gina Park walked up beside him and checked her datapad. She was young but very smart and had worked with human diplomats for 3 years. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore the dark blue uniform that all human diplomatic staff used. She looked nervous, but tried to hide it. "Tapo, docking bay they gave us is on the outer ring," Gina said quietly. "Level 847, Section Delta 9. It is not a good location. Most of the important races get bays closer to the center." Hyunwoo nodded but did not seem surprised. He was a tall man with graying hair and calm eyes. Before becoming an ambassador, he had been a soldier for 25 years. He knew what it meant when someone gave you the worst seats at a meeting. It meant they did not respect you. "How many species will be there?" he asked. 47 confirmed, Gina replied. "The Vorthak Empire is sending their top war minister. The Nexari Consortium has 3 of their trade princes coming. The Zephyrian Collective is bringing their entire ruling council." Taemin Lee emerged from the back of the transport. He was shorter than Hyunwoo but had the same military bearing. His job was to protect the diplomatic team, but Hyunwoo knew there was more to his background than the official record showed. Taemin had scars on his hands that came from fights with things that were not human. "I finished checking the security briefings," Taemin said. "This station has been neutral ground for over 200 years. No weapons are allowed except for ceremonial ones. The peace is kept by automated systems that can disable any ship or person who breaks the rules." The transport shuddered slightly as it entered the docking bay. Through the thick metal walls, they could hear the hiss of the atmosphere seals engaging. A soft chime indicated that it was safe to disembark. Hyunwoo straightened his formal diplomatic robes. They were simple compared to what other species wore, but they carried the symbols of Earth and the united human colonies. The fabric was dark green with silver threading that showed the constellation patterns visible from humanity's homeworld. "Remember," Hyunwoo said to his team, "we are here to prevent a war. The colonies in the Outer Rim have resources that many species want. If we can create a fair sharing agreement, millions of lives will be saved. If we fail, those same millions will die in the fighting that follows." The airlock door opened, and they stepped onto the station. The gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth normal, and the air had a metallic taste. The corridor was wide enough for 20 people to walk side by side. The walls were covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move when you looked at them directly. A robot guide approached them. It was shaped like a floating silver ball with 4 mechanical arms. When it spoke, the voice came from speakers hidden in the walls around them. "Welcome to Galactic Council Station. You are the human delegation. Please follow the marked path to Conference Hall Omega. Your assigned preparation time is 30 standard minutes." As they walked through the corridors, Hyunwoo observed the other delegates. A group of Vorthak warriors stomped past wearing armor that looked like it was made from the bones of large animals. They were tall and broad with skin that had a greenish tint. Their leader had scars across his face and carried a ceremonial sword that hummed with energy. The Nexari moved in the opposite direction. They were thin and pale with large eyes that never seemed to blink. Their clothes looked expensive and were covered in small devices that probably recorded everything they saw and heard. One of them noticed Hyunwoo watching and made a sound that might have been laughter. "Look," the Nexari said to his companions in accented Standard Galactic. "The new species thinks it belongs here." "Quiet, Veltar," another Nexari replied. "We should not mock them too much before the formal session. It would be unseemly." But Hyunwoo could hear the amusement in their voices. He had expected this reaction. Humanity had only made contact with the greater galactic community 5 years ago. To species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, humans were infants playing at being adults. They reached Conference Hall Omega and found their assigned seating area. It was in the back corner, far from the central speaking platform. The seats were smaller than human standard and clearly designed for a different body type. Gina had to use a portable cushion to sit comfortably. The hall itself was enormous. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into shadows. Thousands of seats were arranged in concentric circles around the central platform. Each section was marked with the symbols and colors of different species. Some areas had special atmosphere controls for races that breathed different gases. Others had gravity adjusters for species that came from worlds with unusual conditions. As the hall filled, Hyunwoo studied the other delegations. The Thraxians looked like giant insects and communicated by changing the colors of their shell-like skin. The Corvan Republic sent representatives who were essentially living crystals that sang to each other in frequencies that made human teeth. Ak. The Eldari Dominion delegates were so tall and thin that they had to duck to fit through doorways meant for other species. A deep tone rang through the hall, and all conversation stopped. The central platform began to glow, and a holographic image appeared above it. It showed the current disputed territories in the outer rim, where several species had competing claims. The station's AI announced the beginning of the session. The HFY 4147th Galactic Council session is now in order. Today's primary agenda concerns territorial disputes in grid sectors 7 Alpha through 12 Gamma, commonly known as the Outer Rim. The human delegation has requested mediation rights and the opportunity to present a proposal for peaceful resolution. Immediately, sounds of derision filled the hall. The Vorthak delegation made loud grunting noises that sounded like aggressive laughter. Several Nexari were openly snickering. Even some of the smaller species that usually remained neutral seemed amused. The chair recognizes War Minister Thrak Vor of the Vorthak Empire, the AI announced. A massive Vorthak stood up in the front section. His armor was decorated with the skulls of creatures from a dozen different worlds. When he spoke, his voice was so deep that it made the floor vibrate. "Honored Council," Thrak Vor began, "why do we waste time listening to a species that learned to leave their homeworld less than a standard decade ago? The Vorthak Empire has claimed those sectors through right of conquest. We have shed blood for those worlds. We have earned them through strength." More approving sounds came from the warrior species in the hall. The Corvan crystals chimed in harmony, and the Thraxians flashed patterns of agreement across their shells. The chair recognizes Trade Prince Nexgul of the Nexari Consortium, the AI continued. A Nexari with particularly large eyes and pale skin stood gracefully. Unlike the Vorthak, he spoke softly, but his words carried clearly through the hall's acoustic systems. "While we appreciate the Vorthak position," Nexgul said with obvious false politeness, "the consortium prefers a more civilized approach. Those sectors contain valuable trade routes and resource deposits. They should be managed by those with the experience and infrastructure to use them properly. Humanity lacks both. Furthermore," another Nexari added, "the human colonies in that region are barely established. They have no real claim beyond occupying a few scattered planets with minimal populations." Hyunwoo felt Gina tense beside him. Taemin's hand moved slightly closer to where a weapon would normally be carried, but Hyunwoo remained calm. He had expected this dismissal. What mattered was how he responded. "The chair recognizes Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim of the United Human Colonies," the AI announced. Hyunwoo stood slowly and walked to the central platform. The hall grew quiet as thousands of alien eyes focused on him. He activated the holographic display and brought up his prepared presentation. "Honored delegates," Hyunwoo began, Humanity comes before this council not as conquerors or exploiters, but as neighbors seeking peaceful coexistence. Our proposal is simple. Establish a joint administration for the disputed sectors with fair representation for all species that have legitimate interests in the region. The Vorthak delegation immediately erupted in what could only be described as roaring laughter. The sound was so loud that several smaller species covered their auditory organs. Even the usually dignified Eldari were making soft sounds that indicated amusement, joint administration, Thrakvor bellowed. Shared resources? What manner of weakness is this? The strong take what they can hold. The weak beg for scraps. Next goal was more subtle but equally dismissive. Ambassador Kim, your species shows admirable optimism, but galactic politics are not governed by idealistic wishes. Resources flow to those who can extract and distribute them efficiently. Sentiment has no place in such decisions. Other delegates began speaking without waiting for formal recognition. The first day of the recess brought news that made Hyunwoo's concerns seem mild by comparison. Gina burst into their quarters with her datapad showing incoming reports from across the galaxy. Her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly as she handed him the device. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," she said. "The galactic media networks are covering our council appearance." Hyunwoo took the pad and began scrolling through the reports. What he saw was worse than simple dismissal. The major news outlets were treating humanity's diplomatic proposal as entertainment. The headlines were brutal in their mockery. Infant. Species demands seat at big table, read one Nexari financial network. Another proclaimed, human delusions provide comic relief at council session. A Vorthak military broadcast had titled their coverage, New Prey Species Volunteers for Conquest. But it was the detailed coverage that truly revealed how completely the galaxy had dismissed humanity's relevance. Gina had translated several of the reports, and the pattern was clear across all species and networks. The Vorthak Empire's official war singers had composed a new battle hymn called The Hairless Primate's Lament. It described humans as soft-skinned, creatures who mistake their own weakness for virtue, and suggested that human colonies would cry like nestlings when real predators arrive. The song was already being broadcast on military frequencies throughout Vorthak space. The Nexari Consortium had published economic analyses predicting the inevitable human capitulation. Their trade journals discussed optimal partition strategies for primitive human infrastructure and projected resource yields from former human territories. One particularly detailed report outlined how human population centers could be efficiently relocated to make room for productive species. Even worse were the smaller species that humanity had hoped might remain neutral. The Thraxian Collective had issued formal statements describing humans as amusing but irrelevant newcomers who do not understand their place in the natural order. The Corvin Republic's crystal singers were composing harmonic sequences that, roughly translated to, the young ones will learn humility through suffering. Taimin entered the room as Hyunwoo finished reading. His expression was grim, and he carried a secured communication device that could only receive messages from human intelligence networks. "It gets worse," Taimin said without preamble. Sujin Choi has been monitoring alien communication channels. She's discovered something that changes everything. He activated the device, and Sujin's voice filled the room. She was one of humanity's best intelligence operatives, stationed on a listening post at the edge of human space. Her job was to monitor alien fleet movements and diplomatic communications. "Ambassador Kim," Sujin's recorded message began, "I'm transmitting this on priority alpha encryption. What I've discovered suggests that the council session was never intended to be a real negotiation." The recording continued with details that made Hyunwoo's blood run cold. 3 major alien fleets had been moving toward human space for the past 2 weeks. The Vorthak had assembled a war fleet of over 200 ships. The Nexari had positioned their most advanced stealth vessels along human trade routes. Even the supposedly neutral Zephyrian Collective had military units moving into position. The communications I've intercepted indicate that this was planned months ago, Sujin's voice continued. The council invitation was designed to give them legal justification for what they were already planning to do. They needed humanity to appear weak and unreasonable in front of the galaxy. Our diplomatic failure gives them the excuse they want. Taemin stopped the recording and looked at Hyunwoo. There's more. Donghyun Yoon at Deep Space Monitor Station 7 has been tracking the fleet movements. The aliens aren't just positioning for intimidation. They're preparing for full occupation. Hyunwoo set down the datapad and walked to the window. Outside, the normal traffic around the council station continued. Ships arrived and departed, carrying delegates who probably had no idea that a war was about to begin. Or perhaps they did know and simply did not care what happened to humanity. "Show me the fleet positions," he said quietly. Taemin activated a holographic display that filled half the room. It showed human space as a cluster of green dots surrounded by red markers indicating alien military units. The pattern was unmistakable. Human colonies were about to be surrounded and cut off from each other. "The Vorthak fleet is here," Taemin pointed to a concentration of red symbols near the human military training worlds. "If they attack there first, they eliminate our best defended positions. The Nexari are positioning to cut off the trade routes that supply our outer colonies. The Zephyrians are moving to block any retreat toward the galactic core." Gina had been studying her own datapad during this briefing. Now she looked up with an expression of horrified understanding. "Sir, I've been analyzing the timing. The alien fleets began moving before the council session was even announced. This whole diplomatic process was designed to fail from the beginning." "How long before they're in position?" Hyunwoo asked. 48 hours at most," Taemin replied. "Some of the faster Nexari ships are already at their attack coordinates. They're just waiting for the signal." Hyunwoo stood silently for several minutes, processing the implications. Humanity had sent him here believing that peaceful negotiation was possible. Instead, he had walked into an elaborate trap designed to justify genocide. The laughter in the council chamber had not been simple arrogance. It had been the cruelty of predators playing with their prey. "What kind of resistance can our colonies mount?" he asked. Taemin's expression grew even more grim. "The outer settlements have minimal defenses. Most of our military assets are concentrated around Earth and the core worlds. The colonies they're targeting were specifically chosen because they can't fight back effectively." "Population numbers?" "Approximately 40 million humans in the territories they're planning to occupy. Maybe 15 million more in the surrounding sectors that would be cut off. 55 million people." Hyunwoo had known that the stakes were high, but seeing the numbers made it personal. These were not abstract diplomatic counters. They were families, children, elderly people who had never wanted anything more than to build new lives on distant worlds. Gina was monitoring the continuing news coverage. "Sir, it's getting worse. Some of the major networks are starting to discuss post-negotiation scenarios. They're openly speculating about how to divide up human space." She read from her datapad. "The Nexari Financial Exchange is already trading futures contracts on former human mining operations. The Vorthak Military Council has announced preparedness exercises in sectors adjacent to human space. The Thraxian Collective is advertising new colonial opportunities to their citizens." "They're not even pretending anymore," Taemin observed. "The diplomatic process was just for show. They're already planning the victory celebration." A new message came through on Sujin's secure channel. Her voice was tense and urgent. "Ambassador, I'm detecting increased communication activity between the alien fleets. Code analysis suggests they're coordinating attack schedules. Best estimate is that they plan to begin operations immediately after the council session concludes. They want the diplomatic failure to be fresh in everyone's minds when they claim justification for military action. Hyunwoo felt a cold anger building in his chest, but his voice remained calm. Are there any human military assets in position to respond? Taemin checked his secure communications. Admiral So Young-han is maintaining fleet exercises near the Centauri sector, but her ships are outnumbered 50-1. Captain Jin-ho Kang has a patrol squadron in the Vega system, but they're facing the same odds. What about Earth Command? Surely they're aware of the situation. They know about the fleet movements, but the intelligence assessment was that this was just intimidation. The working theory was that the aliens would use the threat of military action to force better negotiation terms. Gina looked up from her monitoring duties. Sir, there's something else. I've been tracking communication patterns, and there's unusual activity on some encrypted channels that don't match any known alien networks. What kind of activity? Short, coded bursts using protocols that look almost human in structure, but with encryption I don't recognize. The signals are coming from deep space, well outside the normal shipping lanes. Taemin frowned. Could be long-range human reconnaissance units. Or possibly... He did not finish the sentence, but Hyunwoo understood. There were aspects of humanity's recent history that were not included in the official diplomatic briefings. Things that the aliens had never been told, because humans had decided it was better to appear weak than to reveal certain truths about their past. How much do the aliens actually know about human military capabilities? Hyunwoo asked. Based on the intelligence reports, very little beyond what we've chosen to show them, Taemin replied. Our first contact protocols emphasize peaceful exploration and colonization. The military assets they've observed are mostly patrol ships and colony defense units. And our actual military strength? Taemin glanced at Gina, who did not have the security clearance for certain information. Hyunwoo nodded slightly, indicating that she could be trusted with whatever needed to be said. The final day of the recess began with what appeared to be complete human surrender. Hyunwoo had spent the night alone in his quarters, refusing all communication except for brief coded messages to and from Earth. When Gina and Taemin found him in the morning, he looked like a man who had accepted defeat. Sir, Gina said gently, the council session resumes in 6 hours. Do you want to review the negotiation parameters one more time? Hyunwoo shook his head slowly. His shoulders were slumped, and his usual calm confidence had been replaced by something that looked very much like resignation. There's no point. We both know how this is going to end. Taemin studied his commander's face carefully. Something was different about Hyunwoo's expression, but he could not identify exactly what had changed. The defeat looked real enough, but there was something in the man's eyes that did not match his defeated posture. The alien fleets are almost in position, Taemin reported. Sujin's latest intelligence update confirms that coordinated attacks will begin within hours of the council session's conclusion. They're not even waiting for formal declarations of war. Of course they're not, Hyunwoo replied quietly. Why would they bother with formalities when they're dealing with children? Throughout the morning, reports continued to arrive showing the galaxy's complete confidence in humanity's impending destruction. The Vorthak had begun broadcasting victory songs before the battles had even started. Nexari financial markets were trading contracts for human slave labor as if the population had already been captured. The smaller species were already submitting territorial claims for their share of former human space. 3 hours before the session was scheduled to resume, Hyunwoo made an unexpected request. He asked for a private meeting with the council leadership, specifically the representatives of the 3 major powers that were driving the anti-human coalition. Sir, Gina said with confusion, requesting a private meeting now makes us look desperate. It will only encourage them to make their final demands even more unreasonable. I know what it looks like, Hyunwoo replied. Send the request anyway. Tell them I want to discuss terms for a peaceful transition of authority in the disputed territories. The response came back within minutes. The alien leaders were delighted to accommodate what they saw as humanity's recognition of reality. War Minister Thrakvor of the Vorthak Empire practically purred with satisfaction in his acceptance message. Trade Prince Nexgul of the Nexari. Consortium expressed pleasure at humanity's newfound wisdom. Even the usually neutral Zephyrian collective agreed to participate in what they expected to be humanity's formal capitulation. The private meeting was scheduled in a small conference room deep within the station's administrative sector. Security. Protocols were minimal since this was considered a formality rather than a real negotiation. The alien leaders arrived expecting to dictate terms to a broken human diplomat. Hyun-woo entered the room alone as he had requested. He carried no data pads, no presentation materials, no evidence of preparation for serious negotiation. His diplomatic robes looked rumpled and his hair was disheveled. Every aspect of his appearance suggested a man who had spent sleepless nights accepting the inevitable. "Ambassador Kim?" Thrakvor said with obvious satisfaction. "We are pleased that you have chosen to face reality. The Vorthak Empire appreciates species that know when they are defeated." "Indeed," Nexgul added smoothly. "The consortium has always preferred civilized solutions to unnecessary conflicts. We are prepared to discuss reasonable terms for the transition of administrative authority in the disputed regions." The Zephyrian representative, a tall being whose crystalline skin caught and reflected the room's lighting, spoke in harmonious tones. "The collective believes that peaceful resolution serves the greater good of galactic civilization. We commend humanity for choosing wisdom over futile resistance." Hyun-woo sat down heavily in the chair provided for him. His movements were slow and deliberate, those of a man who had given up hope. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Honored delegates, I must be honest with you. My government has reviewed the situation and concluded that military resistance would be futile. The human colonies in the disputed territories are not defensible against the forces you have assembled." Thrakvor's scarred face split into what might have been a smile. "Wisdom at last. The strong survive and the weak serve. This is the natural order of things. However," Hyun-woo continued, "I hope you will show mercy to the civilian populations. These are families, children, elderly people who have done nothing to deserve punishment. They are simply trying to build new lives on distant worlds." Nexgul made a dismissive gesture with one pale hand. "The consortium has extensive experience in population management. Former human colonists will be relocated to facilities where they can contribute productively to galactic society. Those with useful skills will receive appropriate work assignments. And the others?" Hyun-woo asked quietly. "Will be housed in appropriate facilities until suitable employment can be found," the Nexari replied smoothly. Hyun-woo knew what those words meant in Nexari terminology: labor camps and forced relocation programs designed to break up human communities and destroy their cultural identity. The children would be separated from their parents and raised as servants for alien families. The elderly and sick would simply disappear. "I see," Hyun-woo said. "And in return for our cooperation in this transition, what assurances can you provide?" Thrakvor leaned forward eagerly. "The Vorthak Empire will guarantee the safety of human populations that submit without resistance. Those who cooperate will be treated according to their value as workers and servants." "The consortium offers similar guarantees," Nexgul added. "Productive humans will find places in our economic structure. Educational facilities will be provided to help them adapt to their new circumstances." The Zephyrian representative contributed their own version of false reassurance. "The collective believes in the harmonious integration of all species within their proper roles. Humans will find purpose in service to the greater galactic community." For the next hour, the alien leaders outlined their plans for dismantling human civilization. They spoke of population transfers and resource redistribution and cultural integration programs as if they were discussing the weather. Their casual cruelty was made worse by their genuine belief that they were being generous. Hyunwoo listened to it all with apparent resignation, occasionally asking quiet questions about details. How many humans would be relocated from each world? Which colonies would be completely evacuated? What would happen to human military personnel who surrendered? The aliens answered readily, secure in their overwhelming advantage. They had no reason to hide their intentions from a defeated enemy. In fact, they seemed to enjoy explaining exactly how thoroughly they planned to erase humanity's presence from the disputed territories. Throughout the meeting, Hyunwoo gave every appearance of a broken man accepting inevitable defeat. His questions were those of someone trying to minimize suffering rather than someone planning resistance. His body language suggested despair and exhaustion rather than defiance. But while he maintained this facade of defeat, other conversations were taking place through channels the aliens knew nothing about. Gina had been busy since the early morning hours, sending and receiving coded transmissions that used protocols developed during humanity's darker period of galactic history. Admiral So Young-han had acknowledged the change in rules of engagement and was moving her fleet into new positions. Captain Jin-Ho Kang was coordinating with deep space reconnaissance units that officially did not exist. Most importantly, something was moving through the void between stars, approaching the galactic core along trajectories that no alien sensor network was monitoring. "I believe we have covered all the essential points," Nexghoul finally said. "When the council session resumes, we expect you to formally acknowledge reality and request mediation for an orderly transition." "Of course," Hyunwoo replied quietly. "My government has instructed me to seek the best possible terms for our people." Thrak Vor stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across the table. "You have chosen wisely, human. The Vorthak Empire respects those who face defeat with dignity. The consortium appreciates rational decision-making," Nexghoul added as he gathered his data devices. "This outcome serves everyone's interests." The Zephyrian representative offered their own parting. "Comma. The collective finds harmony in the acceptance of natural order. Your species will find peace in knowing their place." As the alien leaders filed out of the conference room, they were already discussing the details of their victory. Thrak Vor was planning celebration ceremonies for his warriors. Nexghoul was calculating profit margins from the acquisition of human infrastructure. The Zephyrian was composing harmonic sequences to commemorate the peaceful resolution of the crisis. None of them noticed that Hyunwoo's expression had changed the moment they turned their backs. The defeated resignation was gone, replaced by something much harder and infinitely more dangerous. He sat alone in the conference room for several minutes after they left, apparently lost in thought. When he finally returned to his quarters, Gina and Tae-min were waiting with updates from across human space. The council session resumed with an atmosphere of barely contained triumph among the alien delegates. The great hall buzzed with anticipation as representatives took their seats for what everyone expected to be humanity's formal capitulation. Betting pools had been established among several species regarding exactly how long Hyunwoo's surrender speech would last. Thrak Vor sat in the front section, wearing ceremonial armor polished to mirror brightness. His fellow Vorthak warriors had painted their faces with victory symbols and carried weapons that hummed with barely restrained energy. They were already planning the victory feast that would follow the session. The Nexari delegation occupied their assigned area with typical efficiency, their pale forms draped in expensive fabrics that shifted color to reflect their mood. Trade Prince Nexghoul was reviewing profit projections on his personal data device, while his subordinates discussed the logistics of dismantling human infrastructure for maximum resource recovery. Even the usually reserved species were showing signs of excitement. The Thraxian shells flickered with patterns that indicated anticipation. The Corvin crystals were singing in harmonies that roughly translated to "Justice is served." The Eldari had composed formal poems celebrating the restoration of proper galactic order. Hyunwoo entered the hall looking exactly as defeated as he had during the private meeting. His diplomatic robes were wrinkled and his shoulders slumped with apparent exhaustion. Gina and Taemin followed behind him, both maintaining expressions of resigned despair that matched their ambassador's mood. The station's AI announced the resumption of proceedings. The 4,847th Galactic Council session will now conclude deliberations. Regarding territorial disputes in the Outer Rim sectors, the chair recognizes Ambassador Hyun-Woo Kim of the United Human Colonies for final remarks. As Hyun-Woo walked slowly toward the central platform, the alien delegates began making soft sounds of satisfaction. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The formal acknowledgement of human weakness and the beginning of a new era of galactic order with proper species hierarchy restored. Honored delegates, Hyun-Woo began in a voice barely above a whisper, my government has carefully considered the situation in the disputed territories. We have concluded that, his words, were interrupted by a sound that no one in the hall had expected. Deep within the station's structure, emergency alarms began to wail. The piercing tones echoed through the corridors and penetrated even the heavily shielded council chamber. The station's AI immediately switched to emergency protocols. Alert! Massive energy signature detected at system perimeter. Classification: unknown. All vessels maintain current positions pending threat assessment. Confusion swept through the hall as delegates tried to understand what was happening. The Vorthek warriors reached for their weapons by instinct. The Nexari began frantically checking their personal communication devices. Even the Zephyrian Collective, normally unflappable in their crystalline composure, were showing signs of concern. What manner of interruption is this? Thrakvor demanded. The session is not concluded. Before anyone could answer, the main display screens around the hall activated automatically. They showed the station's long-range sensor readings, and what appeared on those screens made several species emit sounds of shock and disbelief. At the edge of the star system, something enormous had just emerged from hyperspace. The energy signature was unlike anything in the galactic databases. The object was easily 10 times larger than the biggest Vorthak dreadnought and was generating power readings that seemed impossible according to known physics. Impossible, Nexgul whispered, his pale face growing even whiter. No ship that size could maintain structural integrity. The power requirements alone would... His words trailed off as the sensors provided more detailed information. The object was not just large, it was ancient. The hull design incorporated materials and technologies that predated most known galactic civilizations. But despite its obvious age, every system was functioning at peak efficiency. The Thraxian delegate's shell flashed urgent orange patterns. Those energy readings indicate weapon systems beyond anything in current galactic arsenals. What species builds such things? The answer came as communication channels throughout the system suddenly filled with a transmission that reached every ship and station simultaneously. The voice was calm, professional, and unmistakably human. This is Captain Wu Jin Nam of the United Human Defense Ship Righteous Thunder. We have received reports of threats against human civilian populations. We have come to discuss your intentions. The council hall erupted in chaos. Delegates were shouting questions and demands in dozens of different languages. The Vorthak warriors were roaring challenges that their translation devices struggled to convert. The Nexari were frantically calculating whether their stealth ships could escape detection by whatever sensors the human vessel was using. Hyun-Woo remained standing at the central platform, but his demeanor had completely changed. The defeated. Resignation was gone, replaced by the calm confidence of a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried clearly through the chaos. Honored delegates, I believe you are about to hear my government's final position on the territorial disputes. What is the meaning of this? Thrakvor demanded, his scarred face twisted with rage. Where did that ship come from? How did your primitive species construct such a vessel? That is an excellent question, Hyun-Woo replied. Perhaps I should provide some context that was omitted from our previous discussions. On the main displays, the Righteous Thunder was moving closer to the Council Station. As it approached, the details of its construction became visible, and those details raised even more questions. The hull was scarred and pitted with damage from weapons that no current galactic species possessed. Sections had been repaired using metals that were not found in any known star system. The Righteous Thunder is not our newest ship, Hyun-woo continued conversationally. It is actually one of our oldest vessels still in active service. It was built during a period of our history that we generally prefer not to discuss in diplomatic settings. More human ships were emerging from hyperspace. Dozens of them, all showing the same ancient design patterns and impossible energy signatures. The alien fleets that had been so confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage suddenly found themselves outnumbered by vessels they could not understand. Captain Mi-young Shin's voice joined the communication channel. Righteous Thunder. Weapons control to Council Station. We are detecting multiple hostile fleets in attack positions around human colonial territories. Please explain these deployments. This is Trade Prince Nex Ghoul of the Nexari Consortium, came the reply over the general frequency. Those fleets are conducting legitimate military exercises in unclaimed space. Negative, responded Chief Engineer Sok-jin Bae from the Righteous Thunder. Our sensor analysis indicates coordinated attack formations targeting civilian population centers. These deployments violate 13 separate galactic treaties regarding the protection of non-combatant populations. Thrakvor was no longer sitting. The massive Vorthak warrior had risen to his full height and was pointing one clawed finger at Hyun-woo. You deceived us, human. You came here pretending weakness while hiding military assets. I came here offering peace, Hyun-woo corrected. The deception was your assumption that peaceful intentions indicate military weakness. But how? The Bet Zephyrian representative asked, their crystalline voice ringing with harmonics of confusion. Human first contact protocols indicated a species barely capable of interstellar travel. Your technology appeared primitive compared to established galactic standards. Hyun-woo activated the holographic display at the central platform. Instead of diplomatic charts and resource allocation maps, it now showed star charts from a region of space that most species in the hall had never seen. Human first contact protocols were designed to make us appear harmless, he said. We learned long ago that revealing our true capabilities tends to make neighbors nervous. The star charts showed a section of the galaxy that appeared to be completely empty. No stars, no planets, no signs of life or civilization. But the maps were annotated with battle markers and tactical notes that suggested massive conflicts had taken place in that apparently vacant region. What are we looking at? Demanded a Corvin crystal singer whose harmonic frequencies had shifted to patterns of fear. The former territory of a species called the Void Hunters, Hyun-woo replied. They had been consuming star systems for approximately 50,000 years before humanity made contact with them. They ate entire civilizations and used the energy to fuel their expansion into new regions of space. Former territory? Nex Ghoul asked quietly. Yes, former. They no longer exist. The implications of that simple statement sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. The sensor readings from the human fleet were beginning to make sense in a new and terrifying context. These were not exploration vessels or even normal military ships. They were weapons designed to fight enemies that could destroy entire star systems. The Righteous Thunder and her sister ships were built to hunt things that made your most powerful dreadnoughts look like children's toys, Hyun-woo continued. We hoped we would never need them again. The 30-minute deadline Captain Mi-young Shin had announced was counting down on every display screen in the council chamber. The alien delegates watched in growing horror as their supposedly overwhelming fleets began reporting system malfunctions, weapons failures, and navigation errors that made retreat impossible, even for those commanders wise enough to attempt it. Thrakvor was the first to understand what was happening. His scarred face contorted with rage as he realized that his proud war fleet was being systematically disabled without a single shot being fired. Impossible, he roared. Our ships are protected by the finest defensive systems in the galaxy. No species possesses the technology to interfere with Vorthak military systems. Hyunwoo activated his personal communication device and contacted the Righteous Thunder directly. Captain Nam, please explain to the Council what is currently happening to the alien fleets. Captain Woo Jin Nam's voice filled the chamber with professional calm. The hostile formations are being subjected to selective electromagnetic interference designed to disable their weapons and propulsion systems without causing permanent damage to life support. This is a standard pacification protocol developed during the Void Hunter campaigns. Selective interference? Nexgul demanded, his pale features showing the first real fear any human had seen from a Nexari. That would require computational power beyond anything in our databases. The Righteous Thunder carries AI systems originally designed to calculate hyperspace coordinates while under fire from entities that could manipulate the fundamental forces of physics, Chief Engineer Seok-Jin Bae explained over the communication link. Interfering with primitive alien technology requires approximately 0.3% of our available processing power. The implications of that casual statement sent shockwaves through every delegation in the hall. The humans were not just more advanced than anyone had realized. They were operating on a completely different technological level that made the galaxy's greatest military powers look like children playing with simple toys. But how is this possible? The Zephyrian representative asked, their crystalline voice ringing with harmonics of disbelief. Human first contact records indicated a species that had barely achieved interstellar capability. Hyunwoo looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens who had spent 3 days mocking humanity's supposed weakness. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of terrible history that none of them had suspected. I think it is time you learned the truth about human space exploration, he said. We did not develop faster than light travel because of scientific curiosity or desire for expansion. We developed it because we were running for our lives. The holographic display at the central platform changed to show a star map of human space. But this version was annotated with dates and military notations that painted a very different picture of humanity's expansion into the galaxy. 60 years ago, human deep space observation detected something approaching our solar system. Hyunwoo continued. At first, our scientists thought it was a natural phenomenon, dark matter concentrations or gravitational anomalies. We were wrong. What was it? A Thraxian delegate asked, their shell patterns shifting to colors that indicated deep unease. Scouts from a species we came to call the Void Hunters. They had been traveling between galaxies for millennia, consuming entire civilizations and using the energy to fuel their expansion. They did not just kill other species, they erased them completely. Not just the populations, but the planets, the stars, even the space where those systems had existed. The display showed tactical analyses and battle reports from conflicts that had never appeared in any galactic database. Massive engagements between human fleets and entities that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Weapons that could crack moons being used against opponents who shrugged off planet-killing attacks. The first contact with Void Hunter scouts taught us that our conventional military technology was completely inadequate, Hyunwoo said. Missiles that could level cities had no effect. Energy weapons that could boil oceans were absorbed and converted into fuel for their advance. Young-Soo Kim's voice joined the communication from a ship that had not been visible on any sensor display until that moment. This is Colonel Kim aboard the stealth reconnaissance vessel Silent Watcher. I was part of the first human unit to engage Void Hunter forces in direct combat. Our entire battle group was eliminated in 47 seconds. Young-Soo survived because his ship was blown far enough from the battle zone to escape detection, Hyunwoo continued. His report led to the development of new weapons and tactics, specifically designed to fight enemies that operated outside normal physical laws. The aliens were beginning to understand the true scope of what humanity had survived. The species, They had dismissed as primitive newcomers had fought and won a war against entities that made galactic empires look like local tribal conflicts. How many of these void hunters were there? Nexgul asked quietly. We never determined exact numbers. Haewon Lee replied from her position as chief science officer aboard the Righteous Thunder. Conservative estimates suggested several thousand individual entities supported by millions of smaller constructs. They had been operating for at least 50,000 years and had consumed approximately 40% of our local galactic group. And you defeated them? The Eldari representative asked in their wind chime voice. We eliminated them, Hyun-woo corrected. Complete extinction across multiple dimensions of space-time. The Void Hunters are not just dead, they never existed. The casual way he made that statement sent chills through every alien in the chamber. Retroactive elimination across multiple dimensions required technology and understanding of physics. That was literally beyond their comprehension. The war lasted 37 years, Hyun-woo continued. We lost approximately 2 billion people and had to evacuate Earth twice when Void Hunter main forces broke through our defensive perimeters. But we learned. We adapted. We built weapons that could kill things that fed on stellar energy. And when the war was over, a Corvan crystal singer asked, we realized that the galaxy was a very dangerous place and that appearing weak was often safer than demonstrating strength, Hyun-woo replied. So when we made first contact with galactic civilization, we chose to present ourselves as peaceful explorers rather than veteran warriors. The countdown timer showed 15 minutes remaining. Throughout the system, alien fleet commanders were reporting complete systems failures. Ships that had been confident predators an hour earlier were now helpless prey drifting in space. This is Admiral So Young-han aboard the UHDS Nemesis, came a new voice over the communication system. I am currently monitoring 47 alien military vessels in attack formation around human colonial territories. Recommend immediate withdrawal to avoid unnecessary casualties. Thrakvor finally found his voice again. What casualties? Your ships have not fired a single shot. Because we do not need to fire shots to disable primitive technology, Captain Nam replied calmly. However, if you prefer a more direct demonstration of our capabilities, we can accommodate that request. That will not be necessary, Nexgul said quickly. The consortium is prepared to withdraw our fleet immediately and discuss new terms for the territorial agreements. An excellent decision, Hyun-woo said. I am pleased that wisdom has finally prevailed. But Thrakvor was not ready to surrender his position so easily. The massive Vorthak warrior stood to his full imposing height and pointed an accusing claw at the human ambassador. This is treachery, he snarled. You came here pretending to be weak while hiding weapons of mass destruction. The Vorthak Empire does not submit to deceit. Hyun-woo looked at the alien war minister with something approaching pity. War minister, I came here offering to share resources peacefully. Your response was to plan the enslavement of 55 million human civilians. Which of us is guilty of treachery? We sought to restore proper order to the galaxy, Thrakvor replied. The strong should rule, and the weak should serve. I agree completely, Hyun-woo said. The question is which of us is actually strong. The countdown timer reached 10 minutes. Throughout the chamber, alien delegates were frantically communicating with their home governments and fleet commanders. The sudden reversal of power dynamics had caught everyone completely unprepared. Perhaps, the Zephyrian representative suggested, in harmonics that indicated desperate hope, we can find a diplomatic solution that serves everyone's interests. I offered a diplomatic solution 3 days ago, Hyun-woo reminded them. The response was laughter and threats against human children. But that was before we understood the situation, Nexgul protested. The situation has not changed, Hyun-woo replied. We still want peaceful cooperation and fair resource sharing. The only difference is that you now understand the consequences of refusing our offer. 5 minutes remained on the countdown. Alien ship commanders throughout the system were reporting to their governments that retreat was impossible due to complete systems failures. The mighty fleets that had been assembled to intimidate humanity were now helpless targets waiting for destruction. "This is Captain Mi Young Shin aboard the Righteous Thunder," came the announcement that sealed the fate of galactic politics.